Hello and welcome to this video. Very excited about this video, but also a little bit daunting as well because, as you know, if you watch the channel, I am an absolutely huge fan of Alan Holdsworth. I've done many videos about Alan Holdsworth. I met him very briefly back in probably, when would it have been? 1994, I would say. So I met the man. But John McCracken here was with Alan, associated with him in the final years of his life. And obviously, after he made, which I was, it, was it was it Seven Men of Tane? How many Men of Tane is this? That one?
16.
16 Men of Tane, and then that the Strange Flat Tire, and then we waited for some sort of album, and it's leading like 20 years or something of no album, and
Yeah,
you
I
were
think
with
it
him through
started.
that period where he seemed to be eking a living out of doing tiny gigs all over the place. And so I really want to explore what happened to Alan. I think that's what I might
Sure.
call the video. So, John, do you want to just introduce yourself to the viewers and just say what you
Yes.
do and then explain your relationship to Alan Holdsworth?
My background was as a guitar player. Started out, played for many years. Then I got into producing, and then I also worked for a major record company called EMI Music as an A&R guy. But after that, I was still producing a lot, and um, that was kind of my main bread and butter. But I always tell this story. But I had three people when I was a young guitar player that I always wanted to work with. Alan, of course, because the life-changing event. Jeff Berlin and David Sanchez, and those three I've worked with. So it's one of those like visionary things where you vision you're going to work with these people.
Yeah.
So fast forward, I had wanted to do. I indirectly met Alan's manager, Leonardo Pavkovic, at the time, and I thought it would be great to do a seminar with Alan, just fielding questions, kind of what he had done, I think, at the Blue Note and some other places like Sam Ash. So we did that. And, Alan, I guess I don't know how dark do we want to get?
We want to
Because
get dark.
I was accused.
When was
I-
this? When did that seminar happen? What sort of
That
time we
was, I
talking?
think, 2014, 2015. I have a copy of it. It was Alan sadly was in bad shape for that. So this is the part where I took a lot of heat because so eventually I came up with the idea of doing a pledge music campaign, which was the crowdfunding thing, and it was very successful. I mean, we raised a lot of money, but Alan couldn't do anything for us. I mean, nothing. He did the one track that Virgil wrote, and that was it. And there were supposed to be almost three different records coming out.
So if we back up, I can remember I did some master classes and I'd heard that Alan had turned up to some clinics and wasn't in great shape. I don't know if that was the one you did. Through the industry, you hear about this. So when you say he wasn't in great shape, what was the problem? Was it like
Well, again,
rheumatism or?
I have to preface all this by Alan was to this day my favorite musician, and none of this is any kind of vitriolic thing against him. I loved him to death. He was,
Mhm.
sitting and talking with him for hours was one of the greatest things I've ever done. But, you pull back the curtain and it was pretty bad. His drinking was just out of control. I mean, he was a terrible alcoholic. And that's the ending period that I came into his life. And then the idea that I approached Leonardo was let's do pledge music and what was a Kickstarter, all those things were big. I said, I bet you we could raise a lot of money for Alan to do a new record. So that was the idea. And then Alan wrote us, or we talked to him and he said, well, I've got three different trios that I've recorded that I've never released. All I need to do is add the solos. And once he said add solos, it's not going to come for years. Uh, I guess you can talk to Chad Wackerman about that one. So, we did the whole process and we gave away Alan's guitar, Carvin guitars, and we had a very successful, I think we were raised over $100,000 for Alan. Meanwhile, he's calling me almost every week needing money, or he's locked out of his house, or, he's got to sell a piece of gear, or it's got to be. And and it was really just related to I think in the early 2000s, he just really lost the grip on life in general. I
Yeah,
mean,
I want to explore this, but as I know, as soon as you start to explore it, and you and me here are going to discuss this, and I know certain things, and also I've thought deeply about him as a person, and there's some interesting. Well, it's not interesting really. It's not the right word. Perplexing things here is that I I I spoke with Danny Rabin, who did a tour at that time, and Alan seemed to be a lot of fun. And he said he was so. He said you drink, but Alan was always having a lot of fun and enjoying himself. And he's like, "Come on, shall we go and have a drink? Let's go and do this." And he said it was great, except then you realise that Alan was in his 60s, approaching 70.
right.
And so was that quite strange that he was really was he partying or was it alone drinking? What was it?
No, he had again, about 6 months before he died, I had gone out to San Diego to meet with him because we had had a whole bunch of pledge music stuff that I needed him to sign, and he took me out to his favorite watering hole. And we had a very brief dinner, and then he said, and I said, well, I'm going to go back to my hotel room, and then I was trying to reach him later at night because he was going to sign all the stuff. I was going to go
Yeah.
back to his house. No word, nothing. I get a call at like 6 a.m. in the morning saying, "Yeah, hey, John, can you pick me up? Because I couldn't drive home last night. I had to leave my car at the restaurant." So that was he had a watering hole of like people
Mm.
that obviously adored Alan. And that's where he'd go in San Diego. I forget the name of the place, but he was there every night.
So I mean, all the way through his career, he did songs about being down the pub. He did, it's like when he did None Too Soon, he had a brewery in his house and all that type of stuff.
Sure.
He's a northern chap and from northern England. He enjoyed being in the pub. Is that it? Did he enjoy being with his
Yes.
friends, having a
Yeah,
drink,
I think
having a
that
crack?
was that. Yeah, I think and I've worked with other British musicians like Ian MacDonald, who was in King Crimson and stuff, and it was the same thing. They're pub guys.
Yeah.
American guys aren't pub guys.
No, so
Guys
so it
can,
wasn't he wasn't like sat in gutters or sat in hotel rooms drinking alone. He
no,
was
no,
with
no, no,
friends and having a
no.
fun.
Which, leads to his incredible mystique about just being like the sweetest, nicest, smartest guy on the planet and a genius, which was true. But there was
Well,
another
let's
part of
let's
Alan.
let's pursue that before it gets really dark, because you knew him, well, and through that time. Can you give us the glimpses of the genius that you saw at that point? Can you tell us some stories about where you went, "Oh my God, this guy," because he was something else, wasn't he? And it was his whole attitude to music was so unique.
Oh, yeah.
So could you tell us a few stories about that, please?
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple of good ones. I mean, they're short, but one was that he and I were sitting there in his place in San Diego, and I said, like we always say, like, Alan, I have no idea how you do what you do. I said, I know people have broken this all down and done transcriptions. And he said, well, the thing that I always wanted to relate to people is I see the guitar as an abacus. It's me in my mind pushing these, and I never had heard of that before. And it's like, okay, that kind of makes sense. I mean, if you see his diagram, did you ever see
Yeah, yeah.
every note on the guitar is part of his scale?
So what that suggests is that he didn't just see the scales on the guitar, that he could see how these scales related to each other. So if he was playing, say, a major scale, which we wouldn't call that, he would then get the seven, slide it across. He's got the Mixolydian mode, and then you
Oh yeah,
slide.
yeah,
And I think that's what he meant. So he must have been able to relate huge chunks of scales together. That's what that means, which is
yes.
very interesting. Because I think
All
most
that
guitarists
chromatic
play in
stuff.
boxes, don't they?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then also he said that he saw a lot of things in color, which a lot of geniuses do. I saw one of the guys that he could repeat pi divided by like 20,000 exactly backwards. And he saw everything as colors. He saw numbers
There's
as
a
colors.
very interesting interview. I can't remember who he's talking to. He's in a bar again, and someone says, "Can you same question you asked?" And he said, "Well." He said, take the bottles at the back of the bar. You know, you've got all the shorts all lined up. And he
Yes.
just starts to trot them out because he would go through life memorizing these patterns. Now, I've played the guitar for years, but I when someone shows me a scale, I know there's a few weeks at least before I get the shape down. You know, I have to keep going over and over it. And I often
Yeah.
wondered whether Alan had this ease of just going, oh yeah, looking at something, going, oh, I know what that is. So it's almost like a photographic memory, isn't it?
Yeah, because I asked him about his practicing habits as a kid. Uh, I don't think he really practiced in the way that most people practice. It was just like, okay, here it is. I'm going to play this. I mean, obviously, he just had to work on technique, but
You've got a
even
big stretch there, I noticed.
when,
You got some chops. I can tell that as soon as you put your hand up.
well, he taught all of us that, I mean, nobody, I was like a huge Joe Pass jazz guitar head.
Yeah.
And when I heard Alan, it was like, and, there was Al Di Meola, all those guys. Who was the guy who played in Return to Forever first? Billy
Bill
Connors.
Bill Connors, yeah.
So that, they were all guys that I loved, but
Yeah.
Alan did this, it's like, okay, I don't get that.
Bill Connors was an incredible guitarist that had this sort of really wild
Great.
Hendrixy sound. Then he went down the classical route, relearned his technique, and then in the 1980s he re-emerged, sounding exactly like Alan Holdsworth. And I don't know what Alan must have thought because he hated people copying him, didn't he?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's down to the, little minute thing. I don't know why. Bill was a great player. That one of the Return to Forever albums is one of my favorite with him. He could play. And again, his acoustic stuff.
Yeah.
And I never really heard much about him again, but
No, in the 80s he did three albums. It sounds exactly like Alan. Absolutely exactly like Alan. You know, so this
you
guy
know,
who was a real virtuoso player, a great fusion player, must have heard Alan and went, oh my God, I'm pursuing that. And this is the effect he has on people that I find
yeah,
fascinating because since he's died, you feel that he would be spinning in his grave if he knew what was going on with the internet, with the way it is now, and
he'd
the
be
amount
heartbroken.
of people just cloning him. Oh, and I just think, why would you ever want to do this? What are you going to achieve from it?
Nothing.
What did he ever say
You
anything
know,
to you about that? Because that towards the end of his life, this is where they were starting to appear, weren't they, in the jazz world?
yeah, it was kind of really becoming a thing, not quite as much as it is now, where it's just an onslaught of, I mean, it's crazy
Mm,
how, and poor Alan, I wish those people had been really supporting him when he was alive. Now they're finding out, he was Mozart, but living in
yeah,
our time, you
it's
know,
to it's totally. People couldn't appreciate him till
no.
because I didn't every time he came up my neck of the woods, I didn't go up every time. And sometimes I'd ring my mate up and say, did you go and see Alan? And I'll go, yeah. And what was it like? He goes, well, there was only 15 people in there. Of course, if he came back from the dead now, you'd be filling out, huge,
Oh,
it'd be,
exactly. Yeah,
it's such a sad story of
I saw
how
him. Okay, sorry.
genius is received by society, basically.
I remember seeing him in a really what was a cool club at the time. It was called City Gardens in Trenton, New Jersey. I went to see him, and there were about I was one of 8 people in the audience, and he actually took to the microphone and said, we really need you to buy some merch because we can't pay for our hotel tonight." And people were laughing. It's like, oh no, this is true. Like he can't afford to keep going. And somehow it didn't stop him. Of course, he had great musicians who, didn't he didn't pay a lot and
Mm.
they just loved playing with him. But
So,
it was sad. It was sad, and I never right. He never got to see the audiences that. But I think he also didn't like the fact that it was always guitar players in the audience. He kind of didn't like that. He wanted his music to transcend to some other. We used to joke, if you want to never meet a girl, play jazz.
yeah, yeah,
So I think he was disappointed in that he could
yeah.
never, not into the pop culture, but just like a broader audience of men and women. And it's a guy's music, unfortunately. I've taken many women. I took many women to see Alan Holdsworth. They're like,
Well, the thing with Alan is I'm very aware of the amount of times I've been told by somebody, "Oh, I love Alan Holdsworth, but I like him better when he plays with other people." So they want to
Mm.
hear him in UK, they want to hear him playing in gong or soft machine. And the reason for that is because they can't actually deal with his compositions.
Yeah.
But it's his compositions is where the genius is.
Oh,
And I think that
definitely.
if he could have got to an audience that was almost like a classical audience, somebody where they were interested in
Sure.
musically what was going on, I always felt it would have been great for him to write for an orchestra. But when he did Flat Tire, you felt like I'd love to take this. Like it happened to Zappa. Zappa's now being performed all over the world.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
But
No.
his compositional style was so incredible, but you have to put your head into it. You have to like become sensitive to different types of chord voicing and things like this. It's
And like me, a lot of guitar players can't even play the chords that he's playing sometimes. It's
yeah,
just just
yeah. It's fascinating. So
me.
you come up for the idea of this pledge campaign. How did you get the word out for that? Because I remember it was a big thing and everyone was very excited about it. Virgil Donati was involved, and
Yeah.
we waited. There was like these bits of video coming out every now and then.
I think I
I
sent you the
recently
couple
cut
that we
one of the
did.
videos because I always felt that Alan's really funny, and I did a video where I
But
just cut out all the bits where he keeps doing these little asides, and this has done about 50,000 views now. This little short of him
oh, you
joking
did that?
because he's so
Oh,
funny.
oh
He's
my God.
the delight.
He would make me laugh so hard. He's so, well, the British have a really unique, dry wit humor that I love. And he had all of that. He could just, I don't know, he could like enchant people. There was like something about him that really drew everyone, me too included. But it didn't work out for me. It's like one of those be careful what you wish for, because then you kind
Mm.
of peel back the curtain and it's a
Well,
little
tell us
scary.
the story then. Let's get deep into it. So the pledge campaign set up. Just tell us what happened, and
Sure. So I think, as I mentioned, the genesis of the pledge campaign was to, I had always heard rumors, and Leonardo, that Alan was really not living well. Like he was struggling to pay his rent. And I mean, I think he was always being shut down by landlords and stuff. So we did this seminar, and then I had this idea because I knew some of the guys who started Pledge Music who absolutely wound up bankrupting the company. And I said to Leonardo, I think this could be a great idea. You know, so we talked to Alan, very hesitant to do anything like that. Said I can't ask people to donate money for a record. But we brought him to New York. We met with the Pledge people. He said, okay. Then we just kind of launched this think social media wasn't as aggressive as it is now, but
mm,
just through various grapevines. Certainly Leonardo had, because he was booking Alan and knows Scott Henderson and Gary Husband, all these guys. So we got a lot of response very quickly. But then Alan started calling me, and I mean, we talked almost every day for a while. And he said, well, look, I got these three records that I've done with, I forget, one was Gary, Jimmy, and him, and two other trios. And he said, I think that would be the best thing that we could do to release those, but I have to work on the solos. So it's like, okay, Alan, 3 months later, I'm getting to it, man. I'm really gonna get to this. I'm working on it. I need like $5,000 to pay my rent. Okay. I wrote him, I was the accountant
mm.
also, write him a check, and goes away. I think he did during that course, he did one of the whatever it is, the close to the edge ship things.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And he took a whole bunch of people out to drink, and he had like a bill of like $2,500 that he couldn't pay. So I get a call from Alan. I need more money. So I mean, the dark side is that money, and I hate the word addict, but I have several friends who've been addicts, and it's the addict mentality. It's like, give me this. I got to go over here to get this, and I'll come back to you with something,
Mm,
hopefully. And he never came back. He never could, other than, well, thank God for Virgil, because Virgil had written the tune and recorded almost all of it with Jimmy. And then Alan did the guitar parts. But that was 3 or 4 years in the making. one track.
That was in the end the only track that came out, which I remember that coming out. And after it, what I can remember being as a punter, being disappointed because you expected with all this amount of time and all this budget, and he was appearing and telling the truth, wasn't he? He would appear on videos and say, "This is the," because it was the digital technology that had really. Is that right? Once he had
Oh,
unlimited time.
oh, that's the other side of this is that Alan, the genius and electronic genius he was horrible at computers. And he was doing most of this on Cubase. And I had been a Cubase. So
Mm.
either it was me or I forget the guy from Steinberg who used to talk to him through all this stuff. So that was a whole other, he'd inadvertently delete stuff. And just, it was very funny.
Well, they say you say he inadvertently deletes stuff, but I've heard that when they did the IOU album, which they made on that barge, that they recorded the
Yeah.
album, it was incredible, and then Alan sneaked in one night and erased it all and made them all do it again, even though,
Oh,
and they're all going, but this, and so they had to replicate it. It was never quite there. Now the IOU album, I think, is one of my favorite albums by him, but God knows what was there beforehand. So it does make you think when someone's saying, "Oh, I've inadvertently deleted that." That it's almost like I think it's called creative incompetence, where you
well, that's good. I
could
like
get
that.
your way by sort of going, "Oh no, I can't work this, and it's gone wrong," and you actually have more control. He was a massive perfectionist, wasn't he? You-
Oh, I've never met anyone, because again, like anyone with Alan would say, like, what do you think of your older records? It's like he couldn't even think about them, couldn't listen to them, didn't like them. I told you the thing with, he was in Japan and he stopped the performance and gave his guitar away to a patron, and the guy left the club. That was the only guitar that Alan had. Alan stopped and said, "I really suck," and gave the guitar to one of the people in the audience, and the guy started to leave the club with it. So Leonardo had to chase the guy to get the guitar back. I was in the middle of a set, and there was a lot of that.
So
The,
underneath all the partying, do you think there was a big dose of self-loathing there?
oh yeah, I used to tell. Well, my ex-wife used to be I mean, she is a psychologist, doctor, and she met Alan a few times and said he's got one of the worst anxiety disorders like I've ever seen. And the amount of, yeah, self-loathing and dysfunctionality about the way he sees himself is staggering. He did not like himself. He did not like what he did. So it's the irony of all is that this guy who's just incredible doesn't like what he's doing, or there's nothing's going to satisfy him. He never could tell me if there's anything that he even did that he liked. And I'm going, oh my God, there's, Tavocron, there's Tony Williams, there's all this stuff. Like, I
I
think
mean, I
this,
find it very moving. I've suffered with terrible anxiety all my life. I've had three breakdowns. The last one was quite recent, just before I set the YouTube. The YouTube, it's almost like it's a machine that's in my head, and it needs to be on something.
yeah,
It's like uh, it's it's a desire to create, but it's also without anything to create. It works. It pulls things apart, and I I over the years have developed strategies which I've spoken about on the channel, and I think this is one of the reasons why people like the channel because I started to think that my anxiety is not a bad thing. It's just a flip side of the creativity. And I thought, well, how does that work? And I thought, well, if you're trying to create something, if you're satisfied with it very quickly, you're not going to work at it.
right.
And what made me realize this is that I was in the old days when they used to have X Factor and Pop Idol, they used to show the auditions, and there's an enjoyment of watching someone get up and do an audition and they're not very good. That's part of the sell for these programs. They get up, but it's not funny because they're not very good. It's funny because they think they're good.
Exactly.
And so I realized that not having no talent is having the opposite of self-loathing. You think you're better than you actually are. And so the
Okay.
more you go towards creative genius is actually an aspect of huge self-loathing, which is why I use the word self-loathing and anxiety. Now, it's obvious. I met Alan, and all he told me, the only conversation I had with him was about 2 minutes, and he was just apologizing profusely for just performing the greatest concert I've ever seen. That when I rated all my concerts, all of them, I've seen Miles Davis and everybody, that Alan Holdsworth concert, I've seen him twice, but the second one that I spoke to him on, he was apologizing for. And my friend who was a guitar player, when the gig finished, he was actually sat there staring at the empty stage, and we had to go up and tap him. And he went, "Oh yeah, 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 yeah." So we got to go. Oh yeah, sorry, mate. Oh, and he was just so blown away. And so
Yeah.
I know the self-loathing's there, but what was the anxiety like? And how did that manifest? And what was he worried about?
Um, well, again, I'm guessing like I think he got divorced in the early 2000s, I think. And I think that pushed him in a certain place. I think the anxiety was just it just overwhelmed him. I mean, he couldn't like the solos. I mean, he did that one solo, but we had all this music that he was trying to play over and he just couldn't. And then he was using that excuse of Cubase and it's not working and things are disappearing. And it's like, I don't know how to send an attachment, which is actually true. It's like, it's like, Alan, how is this possible, man? I'm talking to like Shakespeare and you
I
can't.
don't believe. Do you really believe the bloke that had that sort of memory to be able to see that stuff and also wire amps up and pickups and that they couldn't work, that you
He
go
could have
click
built the
attachment,
computer he was on.
paper clip.
Yeah, no, that's the kind of great disconnect. And I always loved the phrase that Alan wasn't from this planet, and that was a little bit like you really are dealing with an alien personality. This guy does not live in a normal way, any way that I really understand. But I love him, and how he came to this, I have no idea. I
It's
mean, as much I
fascinating. I
think
mean, I know that throughout the 80s, he was working towards building a studio at home. And by the time you get to None Too Soon, you can see that there's this wooden studio, which I assume was his studio at home. And he
the
got like a
brewery.
little brewery in there. And I assume that was the family home.
Mhm.
And so I assume when he got divorced, it wasn't just the fact that he lost his wife and got kicked out of that. He
Exactly.
lost a lot of his access to studios and gear and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, he moved around with a lot of friends. Yeah. I think there's a video from these guys from Nashville. I think it was the Rocket Pedal that he did. Anyway, it's he's like in somebody else's friend's house, and there's a lawnmower going off during the video. He had like a tiny little studio, but he was
Yeah.
just moving his stuff around like a nomad.
And he also changed his guitars a lot. What he, for someone who was a perfectionist, I always thought you're going through a lot of guitars there. And I think it's Chad Wackerman told a great story that when he got married, Alan was there. And on stage, they got a little stage and they got a Squire Strat up there just going into an amp, no effects. And they said, "Alan, can you get up?" And he said, "No, I did my setup, blah, blah, blah." And eventually he gets up, picks up this Squire Strat, sounds exactly like Alan Holdsworth. And there's all these little anomalies that I thought, was he signing to a guitar company, getting the guitar, selling the guitar, moving? So, and was that the case?
Oh,
Was he
yeah, yeah.
living off the
Well,
gear?
I didn't know Bill DeLapp, but Bill DeLapp, I remember that story because Bill said, "Look, Alan, I'm not making you any more guitars." He sold all of them, and Bill found out. And these are handmade just for
Yeah.
Alan. I think he did that to Scott Henderson too. Scott again gave him some really great mics, and Alan gave him back, and then Steve Vai advanced him a lot of money for a recording that was supposed to, I guess, come out on was it Favored Nations,
Yeah,
and
I
Alan
remember that as well. Yeah.
did the record, never even started it. So whatever that was, he obviously had a lot of anxiety. I think there's that story that he was supposed to tour with John Luke Ponty, and then he just called at the last minute and said, "I can't do it." So it was a lot of those.
Mm.
It was a European tour, and I think he said he wanted to just go home and hang out. So, but I think there was a moment where the anxiety, which probably could have been medicated, just kicked it. It just stopped him from doing most of everything. and he drank more and more.
Well, yeah, you could understand the drinking if you're living with that level of anxiety, because that's one way of just knocking it back the whole time. And also, if you then get in with your friends and they're having a laugh and you're making them laugh, and it is a very English, it's a very English way of coping with things, that is that sort of Keith Moon-esque life
Yeah.
and soul of the party, and it almost becomes a trap in a way that you have to become, you've got to go and do that.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
because
That's
what
what he was
killed
known
Keith
for.
Moon was he'd given up the drink, he was on medication, and then he went off to some party and he took a lot of the medication, died of the medication because he knew he would have to be Keith Moon.
Yeah.
And Alan's because he seems a very gentle man, a very kind man. He's an absolute musical genius, and yet he's got this. There's an attraction there that you could see that he would be great to hang out with, and there must have been so many acolytes that were so happy to be in Alan's
Oh,
orbits and hear his stories, and that's a terrible thing in the end.
yeah. Yeah. And, as I said, sadly, I got to see the other side of it a little bit. And I actually talked to one of his daughters too. She had terrible anxiety. There were lots of family dysfunctional things, which just is so sad. I mean, he was probably a fantastic father, but he just wasn't around.
Yeah.
But he didn't have the capacity to grab like the last things we were trying to like just grab a hold of it and finish these things. It wasn't possible. And I spent months and months and months trying to allow him to finish. Eventually, we ran out of money to give him, and he gave me what we put out, which was great. Mixes that he stole from Warner Brothers that he remixed with different vocalists.
Mm.
So we released material that we didn't even have the rights to. Alan goes, yeah, it'll be okay. I stole them from the studio.
Now, while this was all going on, they did bring out remixes of all the albums. They brought out a big box set and they brought out a compilation, which I think was called Against the Clock, and they brought out a big box set called, was it The Greatest
That's cool.
Guitarist, or the Guitarist Who Changed the World, something like that, that Alan wouldn't have liked the title of, something very, you know.
Yeah, it's so funny because Leonardo said the last thing you want to do when I introduce you to Alan is tell him how great you think he is. That'll set him off. So, it's but he was sick. He had mental illness. People
Would he sit
struggle.
down and jam? Did you ever sit down and jam with him, or did
No,
you? No, did you ever see him just noodling away on the guitar?
never had a guitar in his hand when I saw him, except the seminar that we did where he played. But he kind of just did, the echoey volume pedal stuff. It was cool. But again, I hate telling these stories, but he was so anxiety ridden that I had to get him wine from the club at 10 o'clock in the morning, and he drank the bottle of wine in like 2 seconds. Then he wanted to know where the pub was. And then we did this thing of which he came in like, 1 minute before and was going,
I heard
okay.
this story. This is
Oh,
the
you did?
story I got told. That is exactly what I got told. It was like drank down a bottle of wine, and then there was a bar, and it was like outside the building. They went
That's
somewhere, and he
right.
just went, and
Yeah.
everyone's going, "Well, we'll take him there," and then we bring him back. By the time he comes out, he was just out of it.
Well, a lot of people around him indulged in that thing because you get to hang out with Alan Holdsworth. How cool is that? Like, oh
What
no, I don't want
what's
to go.
really shocking to me, because I'm trying to get under the psychology of it, is in all that time you never saw him holding a guitar or playing a guitar.
Never.
He didn't want to do it, did he? He didn't want to play anymore, did he?
No, I mean, I think in that video, one of the ones, I think that's the one that Virgil did, where he's sitting, it starts out with him playing.
Yeah.
That was about it. You never, I mean, he would take me around the studio and show me all this stuff, like the crazy MIDI computer that he had was, I think, a Commodore 64.
Yes, I've seen this.
Because that's the
So,
only one that could work.
but that on that video where you when he plays, he sounds amazing.
Oh, yeah. And the funny thing is, he's not using anything other than the magic stomps. And his bedroom was just two cabinets, I forget what they were, and like a U87 mic. That was it. And that's what he was recording. And it sounded amazing. But he, all these guys were trying to get the tube amps that Alan was using, and it's like he had six magic stomps in a row, the Yamaha, which of course, disappoints people. He was
It,
doing tours with used Kettner amps that were just the fake, and he had amps behind the Kettner stuff because they were responsive. I think he had twin reverbs or something behind them, and he blocked.
there's something here, and it's very difficult to describe, but I think you've most musicians practice and play, and they might be in a covers band or they do session, they make some gigs, they enjoy it, they meet their friends and stuff like that. But I think for musicians at that level, the expression of what they do is so personal that sometimes that switches off. It's no longer there anymore. They can't just get up and play.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? They can't just go, oh, just pick the guitar up and play. I mean, you're Alan Holdsworth, even if you're only like 10% of what you were, you're still going to blow everybody away. And that's what you often feel, there's all these, he was playing right up to his death. All those videos are there. And even the video just before he died, he's playing amazing. He might not be as great as he was when, 30 years ago, but in the end, he's still better than anybody else on the planet. It was such,
Well, the interesting thing was I have the dubious distinction, I think, of being part of like the last actual recording he ever released. And we also did a live thing with a company in Canada, which was performance in Boca Raton, Florida, that we recorded live and
mm,
I saw the recording of it. And I remember they were backstage. It was Jimmy Haslip and Virgil, and Alan kept saying, I can't play those chords anymore. I think that was the problem. He couldn't make all those crazy,
ah.
whatever that is, 13ths. You know,
I mean, if you look at someone like Keith Emerson, who was also an incredible virtuoso on keyboards, and then as he started to get older, his hands started to not quite be able to do it, and then it got quite bad, and then the audience started to say something, and Keith Emerson, in the end, killed himself because
yeah.
of that. That's how serious it was. And so mate, this I think if you're a genius like him and you see any imperfections, I mean, look at John McLaughlin. He's been suffering with rheumatism. He's gone on as long as he can. He's a much more spiritual person, I think, than Alan. They always seem to be the inverse of each other. John's all light and brightness and all is spiritual, and Alan's a genius but dark and twisted and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And
He's
and
from a
and
dark
and John
planet.
John McLaughlin is like blessing his hands every morning when he wakes up. It's I had had problems for the last 20 years. I had a ton of lessons, really got into my technique, solved it. And then recently they've come back. And this time when they've come back, I'm pretty sure it's my body going, I don't want to play anymore. I've really examined it. It's like, I don't want to play. I went to my studio this morning to play the drums. And I got there and I thought, don't want to play. Now,
Really?
for most of my life, I couldn't stop playing. I would get on the drums, play 3 hours, 4 hours, stop, have a sandwich. Oh, I'm going to do
Sure.
it again. I'd be doing like 6, 7, 8 hours a day. But now I don't want to play. And part of it is because for me, the music has shifted and changed so much. I love doing the YouTube and I like to get up and play when my friends
In
come round.
general, you think?
But yeah,
I mean,
but I'm not,
without,
I
well,
don't
we're living
find
in
it
a terrible
compelling
time.
anymore.
Oh,
And I've really battled with it, and I think Vinny Colaiuta is. I've heard he can't play at the moment, his hands, and I feel like going, Vinny.
no.
I don't think it's physical. I think it's mental. You get old, your hands are not as good, but there's a thing comes in that it's like if you can't do it well, I'm battling with that myself.
Well, there's a thing of, focal dystonia, which they found is actually, if your fingers are stuck, like certain classical piano players, that it's mental. And
Yeah,
there's solutions to that.
Victor Wooten's got that, hasn't he?
Yeah, and I mean, the things that I've read, it's basically what your body is eventually telling you is, I got to protect you from this. Like you've been overusing these things, and I'm going to stop it. Kind of a fascinating idea.
I think it's far more deeply psychological than we think. I think when you play an instrument, you connect with something which is quite mysterious. And Alan Holdsworth was so connected. So he must have got up on stage and felt connected. It must have been a fight to feel connected. And then you're no longer connected. And the machine still works. You could still put out
Right.
the things, but you know in your heart that you're not feeling it anymore. And in Alan's case, it must have been horrible because the only way he could make a living, if he'd have just been dropped $1 million, do you
Oh
think he
yeah.
would have stopped touring, stopped the whole lot, and just gone down the pub and had a laugh and hung out with his friends?
During the time I met him, yes, he was done playing. I think, you know, I was liking it to like, if you're like 100-meter sprinter or something, if you lose that one little nanosecond of something, you're not happy. It's not what you had. And I think he was so aware of what that was and what he needed it to be. And that's why I said, like when he was talking about, what are we going to play when we go out? He said, some of these songs I can't play the chords. He didn't say it that way. Like it was kind
Mm.
of like unspoken that I can't do this.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's come out of this, which I'm glad I'm realizing, is that we're exploring this. I don't want it to be sort of, let's wallow in how bad Alan went, but I really don't want it to be like that at all. What you're describing, what if you could put yourself in a genius's shoes? We're both serious players, so you have a
Yeah,
rough idea of what that's like. And you know the personal battles. I know the personal battles I have. I'm sure you do, and all
me
these
too.
things.
Oh yeah, me too.
Times that by 10, this guy was dealing with it very well.
Oh yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah. Got really
he could have
far.
been massively depressed, causing problems to people, destructive to the people around him, and then eventually like topped himself or whatever, gone nuts. There's so many casualties. The guy got to 70 years old and he was playing up to the end. Um, because I think there's a I love the guy so much. I've listened to him so much. There's a humanity and love in the music. There's something beautiful. He's not like your normal virtuoso. He's not like Yngwie Malmsteen, for example. There's
No,
something
no, not
humble,
at all.
simple, and yet something awe-inspiring about him.
Well, I think his playing. I was seeing something with Bill Bruford the other night, and they were playing the end of Sahara in the Snow. He's Sahara in the Snow. That ending is just like, oh my God! Like, how can any guitar player ever play that? That's so beautiful.
Mm.
It's so deep. And I think he really his playing was deep. It wasn't just technique.
To me, it's the most emotional guitar playing. And when people start going, "Oh, it's all technique. It was just scales
Ah,
and notes," blah, I think you really don't understand what we're listening to and why we love him so much. And the other thing I feel is that there's been people out there that like worked out every single note he's played. They've gone out and said he's doing this, this, and this, and this, and I think I've unlocked what he's doing, and I think I know what he's doing. And I feel like going, you haven't at all. You haven't at all because you are just describing what he did.
yeah.
You haven't
It,
unlocked why he did it and where it came from.
I think it's a new thing with what's his name? Brett Stein, I think, has done a new book about
Yeah.
but
I'll say it straight. I'm very dubious about it. I don't think it's good. I don't think it tells anybody anything at all. And I feel like there's been a whole industry since he's died crop up. And there's
oh,
people that are
totally.
protecting that legacy like mad. And they're like almost like living off it in a way. There's so many people out there and they all profess to have the Holy Grail and they understand it or they're passing this on and this, and this. And I feel like Alan wouldn't wanted any of this to happen. It's the same with them bringing out these
Not at
live
all.
recordings, all beautifully presented. And I'm thinking, if Alan had wanted that to come out, he would have said, put it out. I bet you he didn't want it to come
Exactly.
out.
Well, when I was doing the pledge thing, there were a lot of, especially European guys were putting out a lot of the live stuff they had done in Europe. And I wrote them, I said, this is a mistake, man. He's not saying he wants us out there. And they would like, oh, but I paid for it and I pay for the TV subscription. And, I can do whatever I want with this. So, but what about the musician?
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
it's
the
Alan
thing is, you
Holdsworth.
could buy them and you could listen to them, but you have to tell yourself this wasn't Alan's statement. And there's a
No,
context going on. But the trouble is with Alan, I have to be honest with Alan. When he does his solo career and he does IOU and then he does road games and then Metal Fatigue at Tavacron, those albums are so idiosyncratic, and he seems to be spanning not just jazz, but there's rock music, prog, psychedelic, almost like comedy, ambient
Oh yeah.
music, and there's vocals and songs. And I can remember I was driving along once listening to Metal Fatigue, and I started to listen to the lyrics. I thought these lyrics are fascinating. Alan's opening up a
They are.
world here. It's all very science fictiony and metaphysical. He's trying to describe Alan's world, and I felt as time went on that slowly etched away. And the jazz guys, they love 16 Men of Tane and the later stuff because it's
Right,
more straight
right.
down the line. But for me, he was at his peak when he could not be categorized, which the industry just hated. They hated it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, no. I mean, they still hate anything like that. He was born too late for what he was doing, I think. If he'd have come up a little earlier, maybe. But it's, yeah, getting back to the guys that try and copy Alan, it's not about whatever he's playing, it's him. Right? Put that guitar in his hand and a tiny little amp, and it's going to be Alan Holdsworth. You're never going to sound like that, no matter what you do. And why would you ever chase that?
When people go, "Oh, this
Very
is how you get the
seductive.
Alan Holdsworth sound." And I feel
Yeah.
like, and the sound's in his fingers.
He
It's
plays
like
some
listen
notes
to him
that
play acoustic guitar, with Gordon Beck. Listen, it's still there. And then it's like you go back to the early 70s when he hasn't actually got the chops that he later had, and he wasn't quite as developed, but it's still all there because it's in his fingers. Oh, it's so I really wish people would understand what music is and give it the respect it's due because this doesn't help anything really. Uh, uh,
No, sadly we're sunk.
yeah, you're totally right. So, what was the last few months like? Did you get to the point where you just given up and there's because obviously all this money's
No,
been spent, people expect to get something back.
I was unfortunately like the lead voice of the Pledge Music campaign, so I was the one writing, and all people were writing me. And there was a lot of vitriol, like, this is fraud. This is, one guy wrote on YouTube, I think he said, yeah, John McCracken made Alan sell all of his equipment, so he can't finish his record. It's, it's like, okay, why would I ever do that? I love Alan Holdsworth. Why would I? So there was a lot of stuff. So I tried to probably made a mistake, but I mean, I know no one ever really confronted Alan about anything, but I had to confront him because we had raised all this money and we were not going to deliver anything like what people,
Mm.
he gave me that one of his what was that? The syntax thing was like Puccini or something. He gave me that track. I said, Alan, I don't think this is going to work. Like these guys are looking for like the trios, and we already told them they're getting three variations of all your trios with you with new solos. Like this isn't going to fly. And he just basically stopped listening to me. Once the money ran out, and then we kind of got into this little bit of an adversarial thing. I said, look, I have no reputation like you do, but I do have a reputation, and people are accusing me of, taking advantage of them. And I said, but couldn't do anything. Then,
What was his reaction when you said that?
same as it was, I'm working on it. I still think I can finish this, but we're 3.5 years into something where he sent me Virgil's tune, Earth. That was it. So, yeah, but you can't, as you know, he's such a beloved character that you can't tell. I made the mistake of saying Alan struggles and has been struggling, and they lambasted me on the Pledge Music campaign. But I was just trying to give him an idea of like when I was, I think about 6 or 7 months before, I went out to San Diego, and it was like 106 degrees, and Alan is in a North Face parka with the and I mean, and no air conditioning in his apartment. It's about 2,000 degrees, and he's smoking and drinking like a fiend. And it's like, this is bad, you know. And a lot of people tried to help him. I
Yeah.
think he's still.
So, when was the last time you spoke to him?
But that was kind of it because after that, um, like I said, he was supposed to sign a whole bunch of stuff. I think it was actually Boca Raton when they did that last gig with Virgil, and he was really mad. He was mad with me, with the whole thing. We had posters that weren't the posters that he had approved, but he wouldn't tell us what other posters we could use. So it's the one where he's playing, like, and there's the Earth. It's a great poster. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but
Mm.
and he was so mad that I brought those for him to sign. And he stormed out at the end of the gig, and there were guys who'd like driven 4 hours to talk to him, and they had come up to me before and said, "Could you at least introduce me to Alan?" And yeah, I said, "Okay." He was so pissed off and upset with his playing that he just left, went to a bar. That's that. That was it. That was it for me.
Well,
And
the
you're
thing is,
helpless. Yeah.
it's almost like you could. I don't know how to say this. I mean, in a way, there's not much consideration for anybody else, is there? In all of this. And I'm sure it's not because he's self-centered or selfish. It's because he's so focused into what he's done for so long that when somebody else comes along and he's been so used to saying, I'm not going to compromise, I'm not going to compromise, which allowed the music to come out when he was young. But then towards the end, what does it get you? It just gets he's hurting people around him, and yet he's protected because nobody wants to go, God, this guy's causing trouble in the way he's working. So you can't get to him. You can't.
No,
There's never going to be a point where he goes, right. Even if I have to give up the guitar and just become a gardener or something, I've got to sort this out. I've got to stop drinking. I've got to go home, whatever it is. That idea of self-preservation that some people sort of clicks in with him, it's just, I mean, because the heart attack wasn't old age, obviously, was it? It was just,
no, no. I mean, when I would be out with him, he'd drink an incredible amount. But as I said, like you British guys have incredible constitutions. I don't know, growing
and
up in
he'd
that
put on a
environment.
lot of weight towards the end, hadn't he? And I think that he wasn't happy with that either, was he? So it's a
Well, that I think from
vicious
liver,
cycle, isn't it?
your liver starts not really functioning. And I do know that his daughters, I think, tried to get him diagnosed many years ago, and he just wouldn't go. They took him to a rehab, and he'd walk out the back door. It wasn't going to happen.
Mm. So
And
where were
then,
you when you heard about it? What was that like? Because I
I
was
was,
shocked, it's like Alan Holdsworth, he'd heard all these things, and then suddenly my wife said, have you heard about Alan Holdsworth? I said, what? She went, he's dying. And there's very few musicians where it actually hits you. With Alan, it was
oh
like,
yeah.
oh my God, Alan Holdsworth died. And I just thought, I can't go and see him again.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, it didn't shock me as much because I had seen him in such a terrible condition. Like when I flew back to New York from San Diego, I was really sad. It's like he could die at any moment. I mean, he looked terrible, and I think he'd even increased the amount of drinking from the first time I had met him. So he was on, I think he wanted to die. I mean, that's pseudo psychology on my part, but there was a level of destruction that he was really aiming for. Like we're saying, like he had lost the ability, if nothing else, to play those amazing chords. Like when you lose that and you know you're losing it, what does that do to you?
The thing is that recently I've been really, really getting into Bill Evans. And when you get into Bill Evans, you start to go, this is like Alan Holdsworth. It's a very similar character, very similar music set, very similar aesthetic. I'm
Yeah.
sure he loved Bill Evans. And when I listened to every now and then, Bill Evans, who had classical techniques, playing all these beautiful chords, but every now and then he will stretch out into what sounds like Alan Holdsworth. And I thought
You're
that's Alan was into Bill Evans. He's taken his sound from Bill Evans. Now I've never read this. I know he was into Brecker and Keith
That's a
Jarrett. I know
great
the
point.
players he was, but
Yeah, I never
Bill
thought that.
Evans, I've heard it. You don't hear it all the time, but he'll come out with this sort of. It's not just playing fast. It's the rolling way, that Alan
Yes.
sounds when he plays fast. Bill Evans has got the same thing. I don't know how you pull it off. I don't know what it is. It's playing a different instrument. Anyway, with Bill Evans, when you really start to get into it, very sensitive, very similar to Alan, but there was a number of things, number of deaths that happened. His brother died, and I think his partner died, and some. There was three deaths that happened to Bill Evans, and he just gave up. And he
Yeah.
kept going, and he was still doing the gigs, but it was the same thing, drinking and drugs, and he just faded away of his own accord. Was there not anything in there that caused Alan to go like this? Was there something more than just the fact that he was a creative genius and troubled and
Wow.
sensitive? Was there
Oh,
something that happened, do you
that
think?
catalyst that.
Yeah. Was there something
Uh,
that he just never quite got over?
well, I was told by other people that he didn't get over his breakup of his marriage because I think Claire was a rock for him because I think she clearly indulged a lot of Alan's. I think he was cycling like 80 miles a day or something, and then also, buried in the basement for hours and then on tour. And so I think, and as I told you, his daughter said to me that she had a terrible anxiety disorder from all of it, or it was genetic. I forget what the part of the question was, but did I answer it?
I think so. It's I mean, many people get
We'll never
divorced and they
know.
have a bit of a rocky thing, but the idea that you then just give up. But I think perhaps, like you said, that he needed that stability, even though he was away. He needed the stability to know that that was there.
He had kids.
Um, and because sometimes it's like for men, once if you divorce and then you can't go back to your kids so much and they go somewhere else and then that's all
That's
going on
terrible.
and to be I really believe that being disconnected to your kids in a certain way and then trying to deal with it by acting almost like a teenager and because I I think Alan seemed to. I mean, was he a womanizer? Was is he
I think he
was
had a
that
share of
going on
women.
as well? Or
He didn't come off that way, but I'm sure he had a share of women,
yeah.
you know.
But I just think there's a certain British way of dealing with these things, but maybe it was his kids, and maybe it's just I can understand that. See, I'm trying to get to a place where I can go, I can
I know.
see what that is, that you can't compromise, you can't do a normal job, you can't give it up, you don't want to do it anymore. The only thing you could do is the gigs because they're not recording, so nothing lives on. And so you're having to travel the world around. There's not enough money for these three people to get around. He's like living hand to mouth, touring,
Oh, yes.
and then once you're touring, it's like God, it's when I started going out on tour, I made this decision to not drink. So I never drank on tour
Mm.
because it was like your time scales are all up. So we would get you drink in the morning, you get to an airport and go, shall we have a drink, because when we get to America,
Exactly.
it will be so and so. And despite doing that, in 2006, I had a drink problem, and in 2009, I haven't drank since. I wasn't alcoholic, but I was just drinking heavily, and I was sort of drinking in the mornings a little bit, and just stuff like that, which, and I thought, and everyone else was doing it as well, so it didn't seem weird because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you do the
Well,
gig
that's the
and
culture.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can remember on tour, you'd be almost like collecting alcohol. You've got an airplane. I used to have combat
The
trousers, and
tiny
back when they used to
bottles.
give you all those little bottles, I'd fill them up, and I wasn't drinking. I was going, right, I'm not going to drink. I'd drink after the gig, but I wouldn't drink before.
Right, right, right.
I've played in millions of bands on stage, and people have all got their alcohol on stage. They're drinking all the way through the gig, carry on afterwards, go
Yep.
somewhere, get drunk, get back to the hotel, 3 hours sleep, get up, get on a bus, hangover. Oh, I got a hangover, we got a gig. I'll just have a quick drink. That might just, hair the dog back. And so it's
I
that
think
I
good. I think it's the unmooring. I mean, they say that about married couples when one of them died. I think he was unmoored by that with his kids. And I think that given and you put on top of that all the money issues that he had, just doing basic stuff to get his records out. Then you take all the
but people
crazy
were coming
science.
along and offering him money, weren't they? And he would,
Yeah.
if it wasn't, if it was, I mean, you come along with this pledge idea, and he tried to knock that away. And if he
Oh,
hadn't
yeah,
have had
he,
that pledge, if he hadn't have had that money, what would have happened?
I don't know.
I mean, everybody who donated it, who loves these music, should just be happy that they kept him going because and that would be possible now. He could have a Patreon and people would just be supporting him
Oh,
just to,
yeah, doing
show
fine.
photographs on tour or talk about one of his guitars, and you wouldn't have to actually come up with anything really. It's such a shame that there wasn't the structure for him almost to move to somewhere else. I think he sometimes. I just feel all of this. He didn't want to play the guitar anymore. I think that's what I
I think you're right.
feel.
I think you're right. I
It,
think
it
he
had become a
lost.
thing they hated, and it was like a noose
He
around
already
his
hated.
neck.
Yeah, he already hated being a genius. I don't really think he understood it either. I don't think he could actually see it.
Really, explain that a little bit more.
He could never, whatever was in his person, he could never sit back enough to go, okay, this is pretty amazing what I've accomplished. I'm actually have done some great. That was not in the cards for him. It was always there's something else I have to reach. There's something else, and it's just like the tone, like okay, this tone is amazing, Alan. Oh no, I'm getting rid of those amps. I'm doing. I mean, he would just finagle everything to get it to where it was impossible to go. But I think he knew that, but I think he just couldn't accept it. And so
Did
once
he
he
get
lost
if
it,
he
so
played like bum notes or was a bit scruffy when he played? Because some of my favorite Holdsworth is live stuff, and I know he'd hate it because he's reaching beyond himself, and you can hear
oh
that
yeah,
there's the mistakes, and he loses his thing, and then he gets back up on it.
yeah,
That's when I absolutely love him. But a lot of musicians who are perfectionists, they don't understand that about themselves. They don't understand what the audience
no,
likes about them, and this is why the industry has producers. But Alan, it seemed, did not get on well with producers because when he had a proper producer like Ted Templeman that could have delivered the album, he could
right,
have just done that one album, made a ton of money, been there with Steve Vai, Satriani, Alan Holdsworth. He could have done it, and he would have been fine for the rest of his career. But he couldn't compromise. And there's a part of me that goes, well, that's your fault then, because no
hmm.
one's that special that they can't just compromise sometimes. And I also was told that certain companies said, we'll take you on as a sort of expert. It'll
Yeah,
just
yeah,
be, we'll give you some money. And you go,
consulting.
no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that.
Oh, I know.
So
When I was with them with Leonardo, and I was actually sitting in Leonardo's office in New York, they had the UK reunion in Japan, and they offered Alan $50,000 for 1 week to come play solos, and he said no because of oh, who was the keyboard player?
Eddie Jobson.
Yeah, because he hated him so much. 50 grand, and the guy had no money in his bank account. That's
And
pretty
you know why
crazy.
he hated him?
He had to play the solos the same, right?
Yep, that's all it is. It's not like they were at each other's throats. It was like they'd made a big album and it's a prog band. And in certain cases, they want you to play the solo the same. And Holdsworth, for all his genius, I doubt he could have played the solo the same.
No,
No way,
no, it's not in
And
his makeup.
th-
His brain would have forced him away from anything that even is remotely repetitive.
it's
But he did survive
bizarre,
that too.
absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, it's
Um, what about
well,
things like Hobo Lobo when he did that incredible improvisationary tour with Bozio and Tony Levin? Were you around when he did that? That was
no, no.
because that was basically they got Terry Bozio, Tony Levin, Holdsworth, and who else was on it? And basically, there was no set. They just improvised. It was very abstract. And I thought, that's what Alan should be doing now. That's what he
What
should
was
be
that?
doing. It's called Hobo Lobo. They never made an album, but there's videos online,
Oh, I never
very
knew.
textural, But
Yeah,
when I watch it, I think this is amazing. But I bet Alan hated this because it's not his music, It's
but
it.
it is true that he sounds amazing on other people's records too. They're still some of my favorite solos of his.
He's on it- it's not Trust, is it? What's the is it Trust? He's on some metal it's the band that
Oh,
sounds like AC/DC, but it's not AC/DC. Trust?
Dokken?
He's on a rock album and it's a
Yeah, I know what you
proper
mean. I never heard it.
yeah, I've heard it. What's the band? It's a full-on metal rock album, you know.
Yes.
It's
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and I've heard it, and it just sounds like AC/DC. Then Alan comes in, and it's like God's music, and it's God's music, and they all sound amazing. And then it goes back to I'll put it in the comments when I've worked out which one it is. There's
I
so
really
many times where he appears on something, and you go, "All right, we've gone from really good to like God's music."
like even the level 42 stuff. I think there's one video from the what is it called? The Hammersmith
Yeah,
Odeon.
Hammersmith Odeon, yeah.
And it's Alan playing the solo on the Gary husband tune. And it's like, oh my God. This puts this band like up here.
But the thing is, level 42, all those guys, they didn't want him to play guitar on level 42. They wanted to help him out. Level 42, a big pop
Oh,
band,
sure.
and
Oh
they
yeah,
said,
yeah.
Alan, do you just want to come and stand on stage, and we'll just point to you, do solos, and we'll pay you. And it was only to help him. This is the thing I think people don't understand. There were so many people out there
Oh yeah.
trying to help him. It's
I
like
was one
that
of them.
joke, isn't it? With the Christian, and he's in the boat, and the big
Yeah.
bloke comes along, and the big boat arrives. Said, "You need rescuing?" And they go, "No, God will help me. I don't need you." And then submarine comes along. "Do you need help?" "No, God will help me." And eventually he drowns, and he goes to God. Why didn't you help me, God? And he said, "I sent a bloody submarine. I sent a ship." It's like it, it's it's. It's such a strange psychology. Alan Holdsworth, such a strange psychology. And it's
Well, just to
also
give you,
sad, and we only talk about it like this because we love him so much. He's such an incredible musician and a beautiful human being. You could hear it. You can't make music like that unless
no,
you've got a real simple, beautiful way of seeing the world. He wasn't out to be faster than anyone, but that's what I feel. He was out to try and express something beautiful.
yeah. Well, that's unfortunately what happens to a lot of geniuses. It's very tough for them. I mean, it was tough for him to deal with it. And again, like you can't say how great you think he is as much as he's literally changed my life when I first heard him. You can't tell him that. It's too much responsibility. And he just never going to believe it. That's pretty crazy. Like if I
After he
was ever a
died, did
genius,
that
I would
did
hope
that
that I
actually
could.
solve the pledge problem once he died? Because there's no guarantee. No one signed a contract. So I suppose once that had happened, everybody was like, "Oh well, that's that then."
Yeah, we
Or
quickly.
was there demands for you to pay money back to people? Or I mean, could you have done
They
that?
were, I have to say that they were good about that. I mean, I think, but as I said, I had somewhere near the end of it, I had to write this email and say, because people are writing me every day going, what's going on, man? You promised this like 4 months ago that I said, it's Alan's having trouble surviving. You know, you want to hear it. I got so much negative stuff back. I said, well, I'm talking to him almost every day. I sat in his place. He's in a bad place. I wish I could say everything's great, but it's not.
Well, if you
And
think about it,
whatever we promised you, we
it
can't
all seemed to
deliver.
change around about 95, didn't it? So you got 95 to 2017. This is nearly that's what's that? That's 20 years, over 20 years of this sort of chaotic. It wasn't just your last few years, it was 20
No,
years
no, no,
of
no.
him not really ever doing anything at all, bar appear in a very small club and play and give his guitar away. It's incredible how long that period goes on for.
It's
You
funny
do you try
because
and you try and look at Alan Holdsworth, you try and look at the albums, and there's nothing. There's
no,
absolutely nothing.
no. And we all, cherish those records when he released them. They were always fascinating. I think Flat Tire was a very strange record, but I've come to actually like it.
Yeah, that's just because you love him so much. That's Flat Tire's the big test about how much you love Alan Holdsworth. The ideas are incredible. I can't get around the sounds.
Sounds are bad.
Yeah, because I mean, it would be interesting to take it, stick it in AI, and then use very great sounds.
Yes.
That would be really interesting to see what that sounds like, or even better, score it for the real instruments. I feel that is his compositional genius was so huge, and I don't think that's appreciated at all because people can't get past the guitar playing. And
On that record.
he's such a funny character. Oh, so that it's been 8 years, hasn't it, since he died? It was eight years this April, wasn't it? So what have you done since then? Because you
Me?
must have put a lot of your life into this, and then suddenly he's dead, and then you think,
Oh,
well,
well,
what do we
I
do
wound up
now?
well, I wound up working with Jeff Berlin for a number of years. I produced a record a couple of years ago. We had all these great guys, the Jack Bruce tribute record. And then I do a lot of independent stuff. But Jeff and I also built a pretty successful online music education thing for bass, which has been great. So yeah, I mean, as you know, the music business is nothing like what we came through. I'm a
No.
little, but there's no, I don't even know what it is anymore. What
Well,
is it?
I've chatted with Jeff Berlin, and I really want to talk to him, um, because there was a point in time when he seemed to be upsetting big sections of the music industry in terms of
Oh,
educationally, really upsetting people.
still
I
doing.
knew I would go to do masterclasses, be talking to other lecturers, and they would be fuming about what he said. And then recently, he seems to have had this road to Damascus
But
moment.
that's he's having known Jeff for a long time now, pretty much when the time I met Alan. Jeff has these epiphanies and then he can't live by it. Like he'll be super nice to Victor Wooten and Berkeley Bass Department. And yeah, I'm sorry I said this. And then, 3 months later, it's like, why are they Berkeley's cheating people out of education?
So they are.
He's
Because
had,
I would love to have the chat. I mean, the thing is with this
oh,
music is that it's not life and death, right? No one's going to die. It's not Israel versus Palestine or Trump
right.
versus. It's nothing like that, right? And if someone criticizes the jazz department at Berkeley, it's not really the end of the world. And if music can't mean that much to people anymore, right? And
Mhm,
I try to whip it up because I go, this is what we want. You want Jeff Berlin saying that he's a master musician, and if and I'd argue against him because I think jazz, you have to respect the tradition to be able to play it,
mhm.
but you have to be open to somebody coming in and destroying it at the same time. And as a music teacher myself, I became very
Sure.
aware that, it's great to teach kids who are into rock jazz because they have a wider vocabulary, but you're teaching cliches in effect, and
Mhm.
cliches that don't matter to these kids. And so I would love to put a word in with Jeff, and I'll give him another email. And if you want to come in on that one
Yeah.
as well to mediate it, because I don't want to upset the man because he's like a bloody living
Oh,
legend, and it's like he's just incredible player, and it's
well, we formed a business together and he was just kind of like blowing up with little nuclear bombs every now and then. It's like, Jeff, stay off of Facebook, man. Just, just the whole group but he's kind of the flip of Alan is that Jeff has a lot of confidence. Jeff is but he's also very destructive, self-destructive.
really
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, well,
geniuses. You see,
he admits it because
geniuses.
he pissed off a lot of people. I mean, he was supposed to be the original bass player in Van Halen. I don't think a whole lot of people know that.
Really?
Yeah. And Alan, and Tony Bloom were supposed to have a trio that was going to tour, and Jeff
I know he
fucked
upset Frank Zappa because he wanted more money than anybody else. I know that story.
Ian, didn't he? Yeah, he
Yeah.
fired them on the spot. Jeff's a great guy, though, super smart. I love his bass playing. He's still my favorite bass. Those two guys, man, together, those Bruford records are just, I played them 8 million times.
Well, the thing is, when you look at bass players today and that sudden increase in ability, and everyone puts it down to Jacko, but actually it's Jeff. Jeff's playing in a way, and Jonas Hellborg to some extent, but Jonas never had that sort of speed and facility.
Uh,
Patitucci comes in a lot later, and he's got that sort. And I think Patitucci's unbelievable player, can do anything
yes.
he wants. I
Yeah.
like it when he plays a four string though. Patitucci
Yeah.
plays proper bass. No, I don't like all this.
Yes.
Anthony Jackson's another one I'd say, but obviously, but Jeff Berlin after Jacko, he's the guy. Takes
I
bass
saw
and
him
just
with
kicks it up into the air.
I saw him with Bill Bruford with what was his name, John Clark,
Yeah,
and I came away from that like going, oh my God, that's how you play bass. I love Jocko, but Jeff had kind of that funk, like deep. rooted tone that was like, oh my God.
And he's got proper jazz phrasing as well. He's studied that inside
Uh,
out. He can
his
play bebop.
harmonic knowledge is amazing.
Yeah.
He
He's
plays with a
something I'd
lot of
love. Yeah, I do want to talk to him on a little bit
okay.
because I know what I'm like. But as long as he can go in and realize that I want him to piss everybody off because it'll make a great video. And at the end of it, in the
Well,
end, respect the guy because it's bloody Jeff Berlin. Listen to what he's got to say. Take it with a pinch of salt, like everybody. You know.
yeah, what I tell people is okay, well, check out his playing. He's speaking from where he plays. He can
Well, the
play,
thing
man.
is that my mate Danny Rabin, who toured with Holdsworth at a certain point, and then told me a lot of stories about Holdsworth. He is now basically he's got a YouTube, and he said this is the information you'll learn at Berkeley, and it's not going to cost you $250,000. You can just get it for free, and he'll go like everything I know about jazz harmony that you'll get taught from Berkeley in 10 minutes. He's doing all these videos, and he's annoying everybody. And the idea of getting Danny and Jeff Berlin together would be like a nuclear reactor, because in the end, right? Colleges like Berkeley, I feel, have just taken something that used to have edge, jazz, and had innovation, and is just
Mhm.
churning out like rich kids who are just playing exactly like
Yeah, well,
everybody else. And then nobody, I mean, Jeff Berlin didn't sound like Jacko, he didn't sound like Jonas Hellborg, he didn't sound like, you know,
no,
they all sounded different, and
no, I know.
so I just think that that would be a real interesting one to pair him with Danny. Okay, I'll send a
All right,
message to
well,
Danny saying you want to do one with Jeff Berlin about Berkeley. It
I
would
should
be
do. Oh,
terrible.
oh
I'll
my God.
take it. I'll take it.
And I know Steve Bailey, the head of the bass department there, who's had a running feud with Jeff for years. You can get Steve on too.
As
I
if they just got to remember, it does. In the end, it's not life and death. It's like they're just talking
know.
about ways of playing, and it's probably they're both right, And Berkeley's
But these
that
guys really get irate. I mean, they would send Jeff some of the most horrible stuff on Facebook, responding to certain things. It's like,
because the thing is, he's pulling the wool away from people's eyes.
oh
It
yeah,
wouldn't matter if people were having to pay so much money. And these departments are basically they'll bring in somebody in the amount they pay them to be a superstar lecturer.
right.
And these guys, I'm a music teacher, right? I'm a music teacher. People who are virtuoso musicians often aren't very good teachers because
Right.
there's I mean you can imagine trying to get a lesson from Alan Holdsworth. There's people online getting his video and ripping it to shreds. And I feel like going, yeah, I know, it's terrible. If you expect to learn anything from that REH video he did, it's like
That's so
here's a
fun.
scale. I like this one. Yeah. you know,
Yeah, check
and
out
that's
the book,
it.
the little book that they gave, and it's like
Yeah.
it's every fucking
Yeah,
note
and
on
then
the fretboard.
maybe you want to practice the major scale like this, and then play something that no one can ever understand.
Yeah, it's just an E minor seven chord, except it's not. And yeah.
I had that video, and it had got like the very first chord in the basic thing. I thought, let's have a go at it, and it got a major chord, and it was like a major chord that was voiced sort of 1, 2, 3, 5. I think that was the voicing, massive stretch. And I remember spending about a week trying to play this chord. Couldn't bloody play. I could play it, but there's no way I was going to use it because it took me about half
Right.
an hour to get my fingers in the right place. I needed super glue, everything to get. And I remember it. I remember it. But that I got to be honest, that video did change my opinion about a whole bunch of stuff. The symmetrical diminished scale, the whole tone with the filled in whole tone scale, the Messiaen mode thing he does.
Yeah.
But it was just I got something from it, which I then used in my own way. And what it was the fact I think it was the relationship between scales and chords, and the fact that
Hmm.
you are allowed to look at a scale shape and this just randomly play any notes you can get and they're chords. You don't have to know what they are or give them a name. And that was a real eye opener for me.
Yes.
And I still
Yeah.
use that now, but I never wanted to do the stretches because I was never very good at stretches. Never.
And again, if you do that, it's like the Bill Connors thing. You're trying to sound like Alan. Every guitar player who loves Alan knows you're trying to sound like him. Why? Don't do it. Run
Yeah,
away.
I
Like,
think that legato thing is you approach it with trepidation because it's you're going to end up doing certain things once you go down that route. You can't. It's like when you play fretless. It's very hard for a fretless bass player to not sound like
Right.
Jacko as soon as you get pick up a fretless up now. That's a real testament to Jacko. And it's like when you play legato now. When
Oh.
you listen to Schofield, Pat Metheny playing legato, they sound like their own thing, but it's very hard. I'll practice legato, and I'm thinking, you're just trying to sound like Alan's, and you can't do it. And I ring up my mate. I go, "Why can't I do it?" And he goes, "Because you're still pulling off. Stop pulling off." And everyone's talking about it, But I don't know. I mean, I think we've got to the back end of this, John. I think we've nailed it.
Okay, well, hopefully
We've
I
gone.
didn't upset you.
You've done a very deep and interesting and hopefully myth busting bit. And then we've had a nice chat at the end for those who want to stick around, a bit of
Yes.
muso
Yeah, yeah,
chat.
yeah.
So I think
I
that I,
hope,
I thank you
no,
very much.
thank you
Um,
so much too. Love your
and
stuff.
thank you very much.
I'll give Jeff the note, that you
He
let me
has
know.
emailed me. We did chat, and he said, "Yeah, just give us an email." But I'm a little bit dubious about doing interviews now. They're terrifying for me to
Oh,
talk to my heroes for a start. It's a funny one, and they don't get the views anyway.
oh, really?
Yeah, the best interview I ever did was with Martin Taylor, because Martin Taylor's like one of the greatest jazz guitarists in the world. We know he's a monster. But I said, if I came up with the 10 greatest jazz guitarists, will you talk about them? And then suddenly had all these stories. So maybe Jeff, I'll come up with my 10 greatest sort of jazz fusion bass players,
Yes.
excluding him, of course, and he would normally have made the list very high up. And then I can go through it and he can give me his opinion and tell some stories about people and see where that goes. And if we get
Yeah.
a bit of the old Jeff Berlin bite, that's what I want from him. So because it gives
It's-
people a different. If you can put that to him, I mean, we've done this in public now, so you got to do it. Say, how
oh,
do you
yeah,
like
yeah,
going
yeah.
on Andy Edwards YouTube and coming up? He'll come up with the bass players. See what he
Yes, he
says,
will. Yeah.
and I'll
It's
get
pretty
so
good.
see what he thinks about Marcus Miller or Jacko or I'll
I
stick a
think he has
few in there.
he has great respect for those people. His whole thing is the pedagogical approach to learning, right? That's where he pisses people off. Like
Well,
it's
we'll
like,
cover that at the end. Well,
yeah, yeah.
I'll give him a grill on
Anyway,
that. Yeah. So we've done a
great
little
talking
bit
to you,
on Jeff
man. I loved
Berlin.
it.
Great. I might
Thanks,
put
man.
Yeah. So, do you want to say goodbye to all the viewers and
Yeah, yeah.
viewers? Thank John for coming in and going through something that was not easy to talk about. And I hope we haven't, been iconoclastic. I hope we've shown our love for the man and your love for the man and his greatness. So,
Yeah. Take
please
care, everybody.
like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it all over the place, get on all the Alan Holdsworth forums, put it all out there so that we can carry on talking about Alan because it keeps the music alive, and that's the most important thing. And I thank you very much, John.
Fantastic.
And I